Hello and welcome back to my OOTP 20 series here with the Toronto Blue Jays. So, I've got some bad news and then I've got some worse news. The bad news is that we did terrible this past season. The worst news is that I actually had to resim the second half of the year because as I was simming, the game crashed, and I tried to keep it as similar as what we had actually gone through in the previous episode. So I drafted the same guys. I did the same trades at the trading deadline, so you probably won't notice a difference. I think the only exception is that if we take a look at the international free agents we signed. This is not the guy who we had signed before because the game just kind of does a random crop of players every year. I do think that Fuentes is a little bit better than the previous international free agent, so hopefully that's okay, but we need all the help we can get because the worst news is that basically everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Our head scout, who I really liked, he has retired, so we have had to hire a new scout, or at least I have offered a contract to a new scout, and he will be Manuel Torres, so still very good ratings, but we kind of had a legend scout before, so a little bit disappointing that he just kind of up and decided to retire, although I don't blame him given how our season went. If we take a look at the team stats, you'll remember our primary goal last offseason was to improve the pitching and the defense. Well, I am unhappy to report that our ERA was dead last in the American League, and our defensive efficiency was 13th in the American League, and our offense wasn't much better either at 11th in on-base plus slugging. We really had an atrocious end of the season. You can see through July, we were at least kind of hanging in there, and then August and September and October, we went 0-10 in our last 10 games. I mean, there's not much to say. That's about as bad as it gets. Our owner is very angry at us, and I don't blame him. I think certainly it is making things interesting that we are struggling so much right now. If we take a look at the individual player stats, you can see that Eduardo Rodriguez ended the season as our ace. He walked a lot of people, and that's going to be kind of a theme that you see throughout the starting rotation and the bullpen, is that people were walking way more people than they previously had and have given up way more home runs than they previously had. And I don't know if that's a combination of the pitching coach or the manager. I mean, I got a new pitching coach and a new manager midway through the season. Hard to say kind of what's going on here. I'm a little flummoxed. But anyway, Rodriguez was okay. I mean, it certainly wasn't a terrible season for him. So then if we take a look at Alex Reyes, this is somebody who you'd really expect to be giving up a lot of walks. He was able to turn it around a little bit. You can see 4.4 walks per 9 innings. I think he's going to have to improve that if he's going to be a member of the starting rotation, but maybe a bit of a step forward, and especially, I should take a look here, if this stuff and movement ratings really improve, then we could probably get away with maybe a 45 control rating from Reyes. Then we move on to Perez. He's another guy who we got at the deadline. Not somebody who's going to strike out too many people. I am encouraged by his really low home run rate. That's certainly very different than some of the other pitchers we have. Matt Schumacher basically blew up this season. I mean, just gave up just a ridiculous amount of home runs. 2.2 home runs per 9 innings. I know I sound very angry, but it is kind of incredible, right? I mean, that's a lot of home runs. So I don't think we'll be bringing him back next year. And then if we move on to the bullpen, our setup men, Juan Nicasio and David Robertson, were good. But Craig Kimbrell, certainly a step back for him, a ton of walks that he gave up. Very high BABIP as well, so maybe that was part of what led to his, I won't say failure, but certainly less success than you would expect from Kimbrell. And the rest of our bullpen was a bit of a mess. I'm going to ignore DeGraff. He's just someone who we called up from AAA because we had so many arm injuries. Sean Reed-Foley had a very uneven season. I'm starting to kind of lose hope in him. And then if you take a look at Phelps, Bergen, and Anderson, Anderson especially, someone who we picked up the last offseason, I was expecting a little bit more from him. Certainly he did strike out a lot of people, but somehow he ended up with a 4.86 ERA. I don't know, that's not encouraging, but really the big deal for me is that Vladimir Guerrero Jr., now not that these are bad ratings, but we really expected him to be a serious cornerstone. And what I see is excellent contact hitter, slightly above average power hitter, which is not what I was really hoping for with Guerrero. And hopefully when we sign this new scout, he will like his power numbers. But I have kind of noticed, even with our old scout, that Guerrero's numbers were declining a little bit. And, especially if down the road he has to make a move to first base, these ratings, they're still very good, but they're not going to be, let's say, an 8-win player. They're going to be 4-win player maybe. So I don't know. If it's possible to be disappointed about a 4-win player, that is my disappointment there. Danny Jansen has been really incredible for us. Certainly in the back of my mind, I'm wondering a little bit if potentially he's a little bit responsible for our pitching problems. I mean, his catcher ability rating is fine, but there's some reason that all of our pitchers just aren't doing well. And again, I don't know if it's the coaching. I don't know what it is. But anyway, if we move on from there, Rowdy Tellez, not a very good season. You can see an OPS plus of 86, just above replacement level in terms of his WAR. That's concerning. I mean, I still like the ratings that he has, but he hasn't really put it together. Reese McGuire was pretty good. This might be someone who either I'm going to trade Jansen and really get something good back, or I'll trade McGuire and hopefully we can get something back from him as well. But I think at this point, having two, I won't say established catchers, but two catchers who I think are totally capable of getting an everyday job, I don't think I want to carry both of them given how many other needs we have. You know, it's one thing when the Dodgers just have every positional need filled and they can carry two catchers like Grandal and Barnes, but I mean, we're not that team. We've got a lot of holes to fill. Anyway, Kai's first season, I actually did find a way in the game strategy to have him sit on the bench versus lefties, so hopefully that means that next year he'll have a lot less at-bats versus left-handers, because you can just see, I mean, he's just totally abysmal versus lefties, and he's pretty decent against righties, at least that's what he looked like last year, and the ratings certainly bear that out as well. Our middle infield was pretty good, though. Bo Bichette, a 4-win player last year, got some home run power there. That range is still an issue, it seems, but I think at second base, you know, it's not enough of an issue for it to really matter a ton. And then Kevin Smith also had a fine season, 3-win player. I don't know that his batting average is going to be 271, let's say next year, but the power numbers are there, and he's at least decent defensively, so I think that's enough for a shortstop. In the outfield, we ended up having Teoscar Hernandez play a lot of games in right field. He wasn't really up to the task. You know, showed a little bit of power and good defense, but the offense just really wasn't there, and that's not too surprising, you know, given the avoid K, and contact rating. Zach Granite in center field, really bad offensively, but you can see he had a 1.4 win season. I think a lot of that is the defense, so I expect next year he will hit a little bit better than 241. He's certainly going to be a below average offensive player, but I'm hoping that he can make up for it with his defense. I've also changed the team strategy so that we're stealing bases less. You can see Granite stole 21 bases but was caught 8 times, which is way too high. And then our other outfielder, Josh Naylor. I think he played a lot of DH this year as well. He certainly should be playing DH. But, you know, again, someone whose ratings are definitely higher than what we've seen from his output. He is only 23 years old, so, you know, I'm going to be a little bit more patient with him as well. So if we take a look at our season goals overview, at least from our owner, he is worried. And again, I don't blame him, maybe not for the same reasons. We are going to have a good amount of money for free agents this year. It's hard to know exactly what to do, but we will have a lot of money. And then we also have an option that we have to figure out. Sorry, I've got so many messages here. Yeah, David Robertson. So he's got a team option for $12 million. And if you remember in the trade that we did for Robinson, the Phillies are retaining 30% of that money. And just given our bullpen struggles last year, I think I want to bring him back for $8 million. It is a bit pricey, but it's a 1-year deal. So we're going to execute that option. Another thing to keep in mind is who we have on the injured list. So Chris Sale, I had to re-injure his rotator cuff. So he'll be out for another 1 to 2 weeks before he returns. Obviously hoping he comes back good as new, because boy, do we need that spot in the rotation filled by Chris Sale. And then Elvis Luciano, he was someone who came up and really surprised. He had pretty good numbers in AA during the season, and just because we really needed pitching help, I brought him up. But he was another guy who actually got injured in the earlier sim, so I had to give him elbow ligament reconstruction surgery, which is not something that was fun. But anyway, hopefully he'll be back next year, and you know, he's really young, only 20 years old right now. He'll be 21 next season. And I think this is someone who could easily be a number 4, number 5 starter, maybe even a number 3 starter. And then in terms of pending free agents, you know, we're not going to re-sign Phelps or Schumacher. I just don't really think they have a place in the rotation and the bullpen respectively. And then with arbitration eligible players, we're going to be bringing back Eduardo Rodriguez for $8 million. It'll be his last year before he becomes a free agent. I don't think I'm really wanting to sign him to a longer term extension, but we're going to need his arm next year for sure. And we're going to be bringing back Teoscar Hernandez, and Alex Reyes does not want to discuss a salary arbitration extension, but he won't really have a choice. I mean, we're going to go to arbitration and he'll have to sign, so that is the beauty about being a team. Okay, so we have simmed ahead through the awards. It looks like for the National League, Freddie Freeman was the MVP, followed by Manny Machado. And in the American League, it was Mike Trout. No surprises there, with Mookie Betts as the runner-up. And then for the Cy Young, apparently Justin Verlander is now on the St. Louis Cardinals, which is pretty funny, but he is still really racking up the wins. And then in the American League, A.J. Puck was the Cy Young Award. Interesting. He normally doesn't pan out in these games. Apparently he's got a herniated disc. But yeah, very good season last year from Puck. So if we take a look at the Silver Slugger Award winners, we don't have any. But interestingly, Joey Gallo had 58 home runs. Of course, Mike Trout had 54. That's still incredibly impressive. And then let's take a look at Gold Glovers. There we go. American League Gold Glove Award winners. So Danny Jansen is the Gold Glove Award winner at catcher. Okay. Very good player, but I don't know about Gold Glove with the defensive ratings there. So anyway, those are the award winners. We're going to pick it back up in free agency. Okay, so free agents have filed, but before we take a look at the free agents, I realized I forgot to catch you guys up just on what happened around the league. God, you can see our 0-10 finish. Lost 11 games in a row to end the season. That really sticks out like a sore thumb. But you can see the American League East race was very exciting with the Rays, Red Sox, and the Yankees separated by 1 game. And then if we take a look at the playoffs, the Padres made it all the way to the World Series, so it seems like their rebuild has gone very, very well with Manny Machado likely leading the way. Yeah, definitely leading the way. Wow, 2 8-win seasons from Machado, so he has turned it up another notch. But unfortunately, the Yankees ended up winning the World Series, so there you have it. All right, so we're going to have $35 million here in free agency. Let's kind of identify the needs, which are kind of everywhere except for the infield, basically. So if we take a look at how our head scout kind of views some of these guys, he is kind of high on Luciano, which is good. Our previous scout was also liking him quite a bit. You know, I believe he's ready for the rotation. I think he would probably be a 5th starter, but I think he's ready to step in. Otherwise, we've got Sale and Rodriguez, so it's really 2 other spots that we got to worry about. And I think with Perez and Reyes, that's kind of 1 spot. I don't really think Foley is another spot, so we're going to be looking for a starting pitcher, I would say. But in the bullpen, I mean, you know, Fernandez, Anderson, and Bergen, I think, are kind of all set. Obviously, Bergen did not have a great year last year. I think it's really this spot with DeGroff that has to be filled. So maybe 1 starter and 1 reliever is kind of what we're looking at. And then offensively, it's hard to tell. I really think we're going to need a big bat, you know, at that kind of first base DH, you know, especially someone that can hit lefties. Because with Tellez and Kai, it's like that is just a giant hole if the other team has a left-handed pitcher. And even in the outfield, like right now we've got Naylor, Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, that's not really going to cut it, I don't think. And we can always trade someone like McGuire or even Danny Jansen. And in fact, I think I am going to look at offers for both of those guys. Obviously, I love Jansen, so I'd have to be blown away, you know, with an offer. But we're going to just at least take a look at that. Okay, so some interesting offers here. Edwin Diaz from the Mets. There's also Dominic Smith. I kind of view Smith, you know, maybe at least in this year's version of the game, as basically a Rowdy Tellez, which we don't really need another Rowdy Tellez. I did like this guy in the Angels, Ryan Zimmerman. It's not the Ryan Zimmerman. Apparently it's a different Ryan Zimmerman. 41 home runs in AAA the previous season, and then this year with the Angels, really in about half a season. He was about a 2-win player, and he is also labeled as durable, which is nice to see. At 24 years old, he's only got 1 year of Major League service time. He unfortunately, even though he's a right-handed hitter, does seem to be a little bit better against righties, or at least has more power, kind of more contact versus lefties. But that might be a decent hole to fill, someone who would still be very cheap, and we'd really be getting rid of a depth option. I think that's the one that's kind of the most realistic and something we'd really want to do. Like there is Nomar Mazara, but I mean, that guy's 25 years old. He just had a 5-win season. Like, I don't really think, Reese McGuire should be traded for someone like Nomar Mazara. But before we kind of make a move there, I want to see what Danny Jansen would get back, because he's someone who's really a seriously quality player. I would expect a little bit more in return for Jansen. All right, so it's time to shake things up. I think there's no doubt this is a franchise-altering trade. There are some big names in here. So we've got Danny Jansen, obviously been a really, really solid catcher. I'm wondering why my pitchers just seem to not be doing well. So honestly, I'd like to try a different catcher. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but Danny Jansen, as good as he is offensively, the catcher ability is only a 50. It's not that low. I mean, it shouldn't really have a major impact. But I think there's no doubt that Reese McGuire at 65 would be an improvement. And obviously he would be, worse offensively. But anyway, we'd be sending Jansen away. We'd also be sending away Josh Naylor, who I kind of view as, potentially an above average DH or left fielder. But he's not going to be a star. That's what he is. He's still very young, so I guess you never know, but that's kind of my outlook on him. And then we're sending away Vinny Capra, someone who I don't really think is major league material, but, he's got some good defensive numbers. He's just kind of a throw-in, I guess. And Leonardo Jimenez, who, again, not a bad guy. I mean, he's really good defensively as a third baseman. And offensively, he might be okay. The OSA ratings are lower on him, but our scout kind of likes him a little bit. Kind of a borderline major leaguer, I would say. And in return, we're getting Andrew Triggs, who isn't really a core part of this deal. He's 31 years old, has some decent, ratings, and I feel like he could be a decent bullpen piece, maybe step in as a sixth starter if, a bunch of people get injured, but he would basically take Josh DeGraff's spot. And then we would also get Lazaro Armenteros. He is someone who I think is, he looks really good on the surface. But I think if you kind of look at his scouting numbers, I think our previous scout wasn't nearly as much of a big of a fan of him as our current scout is. If you look at the OSA ratings, they don't really hold up. So I think he's kind of, he might turn out to be great, and that'd be awesome. But I'm not really counting on it necessarily. But the kind of centerpiece of this deal is Jesus Luzardo, and he looks really, really good. A 23-year-old cost-controlled starter. This guy could be a real star. Now, he hasn't really shown it in his first 2 major league seasons, which is why I think his price is a little bit lower than, what it might end up being. But you can see 4.5-star potential. The OSA ratings aren't really the same. However, our previous head scout also really liked Luzardo. Yeah, if we go over here, again, not to the extent of our current scout, but still really liked him. You can see 65 potential stuff, 65 potential control, and 50 potential movement. I mean, that's a really solid, number 2 starter and very cost-controlled. So I think that this is it's a risky deal a little bit, but I think it's solid. We're basically taking, 3 flyers on guys. I think Triggs, we kind of know who he is, but definitely with Lazaro and Luzardo, it definitely is a bit of a risk, but I see a lot of upside there. Whereas with Danny Jansen, we're still going to have Reese McGuire and Josh Naylor. I feel like, we might want to upgrade in the offseason with a really solid bat. And so we might not even be playing Naylor as much as we would think anyway, especially because we already have Kai, who again is already someone who hits righties a lot better than lefties. So we're going to complete this trade. I think that's our first really big deal. And then our second deal, which I think this is kind of an obvious one, is Rowdy Tellez for Ryan Zimmerman. For some reason, they don't seem very high on Zimmerman. They kind of want to get rid of him. And obviously the OSA ratings are a little bit worrying. However, I mean, I really like his stats. In half a season last year, played really well, hit 41 home runs in AAA the year before. If you take a look at the scouting report, our previous scout liked him in a slightly different way, but still really liked him. Thought his power numbers were pretty incredible, which, would be backed up by the stats that he had, especially in AAA 2 seasons ago. He's a durable player, And Tellez, while I think his actual ratings look a little bit better, or at least very comparable, he just hasn't put it together at all at the major league level. I just haven't seen much power. It's one thing if he's kind of not getting on base quite as much as you want, but 15 home runs each year and 2 full seasons, that's just not really going to cut it. And maybe the Angels kind of see him as his OSA ratings. I don't really know why they want to get rid of him, but I think this is just an obvious deal to make. I almost feel like I should throw in something, so I'm just going to send over DeGraff as well just to make it a little bit more even. So anyway, now we have Sale and Luzardo. I think that front end of the rotation looking a little bit better. We've got Eduardo as a number 3 guy. That's kind of what I think he should be. I think Luciano definitely going to be our 5th starter. And then we have Perez and Reyes who could kind of fight it out. I kind of like the idea of that. And of course, we always have Triggs who can come in as well. But I wouldn't be opposed to getting a free agent starter. I mean, we still have a ton of money to work with at $35 million. So we're going to try to get a big bat or something. I think very clearly we need outfield help. Okay, so I've been taking a look at the free agents here, and it looks like this pitcher, Jayon, is kind of the best option out there. And he's very solid for sure. I mean, hey, ground ball pitcher that throws 100. Pretty good ratings as well. If you take a look at the OSA ratings, they're kind of backed up. He is asking for a long contract, which I never like to do, especially for a 30-year-old starting pitcher. So I think that demand would have to come down, or I would just give him a little bit more money per year, but have less years. Not really sure. Paxton is also available, but at the age of 32, and he wasn't, I mean, he was good last year, but he wasn't unbelievable by any stretch of the imagination. And unfortunately, if you take a look at the hitters, it's again kind of an international free agent that looks to be the best. Now, this might be someone who is, worth signing potentially. I don't know. I forget how many years he wanted. I mean, it's still a long time, again, for a 31-year-old who his game is speed and defense. OSA ratings, though, they do really like him. So that's at least another guy that we'll keep an eye on. And then, of course, there's someone like Matt Carpenter. Had a 7-win season last year. That might be someone who we do think about, but I mean, the guy's 35 years old. I'm not sure what kind of contract he is looking for, so it is a 5-year deal. That's pretty expensive. It's another guy that I'll at least see where the contract offers go to and kind of react from there. But I think there's no home run free agent. There's no one who really, really jumps out at me, which is kind of a bummer, obviously. Okay, so some more irreversible decisions have been made. I really think we needed to switch things up for the next season. So with that in mind, we have completed another trade involving Yusei Kikuchi. So as you can see, we traded Zach Short, who we had gotten in a deal last year. He's someone who, I like the discipline, but we've just got a ton of middle infielders, and that's, again, why I didn't have a problem getting rid of Richard Urena as well. I think they're both, capable, maybe 4th kind of middle infielders. I don't think either one of them is a clear starting middle infielder. In return, we also get this right fielder, Emmanuel Dean. Now, although on the surface his ratings look good, I would kind of say there's no real reason to think he's this good. If you take a look at the OSA ratings, they're horrific. And if you look at his previous scouting ratings too, you can see our previous scout definitely liked the discipline, but didn't really think there was a whole lot there in the contact department. So we'll see how he turns out. I just figured since our scout liked him, might as well take a flyer on him as we're doing this deal. And then, of course, we get Yusei Kikuchi. Now, this is where my baseball knowledge kind of runs out. I believe that we'll be able to re-sign him in arbitration. And in fact, it does say sign through 2022, and then there's arbitration. But he currently has a contract through this next season and then has a player option, which he may or may not accept. So we'll just kind of play it by ear and see how things go. But I would say, the previous 2 seasons he has been pitching pretty well and a very capable number 2, number 3 starter. And I just think he makes our starting rotation much deeper. And unfortunately, we've got all lefties in the starting rotation, which I didn't really realize until after I traded for Kikuchi. However, I think Elvis Luciano is going to get that 5th spot, and he is, of course, a right-handed pitcher. I'd actually like to see what his ratings look like as a starting pitcher. Yeah, so a little bit less, but I still think he's going to get that number 5 spot, at least to start the season. Then on the offensive side, we did sign Yu, who is the South Korean outfielder, was a center fielder. I've converted him to a right fielder. So we're going to keep Granite in center. I think this lineup is coming together a little bit. You can see Ryan Zimmerman as the DH. He is a new face as well. I think the one kind of hole really is Teoscar Hernandez in left field. So I am signing Ryan Braun, or at least I've made him like a $1 million offer, just because he hits lefties pretty well. I think that might be an interesting platoon idea, just because we've got so many hitters who just can't hit lefties. So hopefully he would find a spot into the lineup. He would basically be replacing Griffin Conine, who was actually in my Royal Series, the last series I did. He was really good in the Royal Series, but isn't quite the same in this version of the game. Anyway, with that said, it is the Rule 5 draft. Someone in the comments last time basically told me that there was a hashtag next to people's names, so you needed to put on the 40-man roster if you wanted to protect them going into the Rule 5 draft. Okay, so I've added a couple people to the 40-man roster before the Rule 5 draft. Let's see if there is anyone who is going to be of interest in this draft, and you can see this Gaspar kind of jumping out, at least at me, but I'm going to assume, yeah, the OSA rating's much lower on him, so not really sure if he's going to be any good. Let's just fast forward until our pick. This guy kind of looks intriguing. I don't know if he would be on the Major League team the whole season. He hasn't played above A-ball. That just doesn't seem very realistic. Sometimes teams do that, even if a player just doesn't have much high-level minor league experience. They'll just take him because they like them so much, but this would really be a stretch. Yeah, I don't really see anyone that I'm going to take this year, so we're just going to skip the Rule 5 draft, and hopefully we don't have any of our players picked, because this year I was actually not able to protect a whole lot. Yeah, nobody took any of our guys, so that's good. Okay, it is the first day of spring training, so this is where we're going to be ending the episode. I took a look at the preseason predictions. Yeah, and as you can see, we are projected to be 82-80. I mean, I gotta hope that we are better than that. I think last year I really expected us I think we were projected to win 93. I kind of expected us to be in the 80s. And, I don't know, maybe Reese McGuire having better catcher ratings, maybe that's going to help. But if things don't improve early, we're going to get a new pitching coach. I don't know what else to do exactly, but things have not been smooth, that's for sure. This has been one of the strangest off seasons certainly I've had, where I had to replay the game and do a bunch of things like that. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully things are more smooth sailing from here on out, but thanks for sticking with it. And we'll see you guys, I guess, around the first year player draft.